Before the story begins, I'd like to ask you to subscribe and like. This will help the channel grow. The Orchard at Midnight, a detective mystery story. Detective Rowan Hayes had seen strange cases before, but none that began with a frantic farmer insisting that someone had stolen his apples. Not just any apples. The entire premium harvest from Merriweather Orchard, a widely celebrated fruit farm known for producing a rare breed of crimson honey apples that sold for hundreds per crate. At first, Rowan expected another exaggerated rural dispute, but when she arrived at the orchard just after sunrise, she realized this was something far stranger. The orchard looked like a battlefield. Dozens of trees were entirely stripped, their branches bare as bones, the ground littered with only a few shredded leaves. Crates that had been stacked the previous evening were overturned, smashed, or missing altogether. Rowan paced between the rows, noticing the same detail again and again. No footprints. Not even tire tracks. Only faint drag marks that seemed to vanish halfway across the field, as if the crates had evaporated into thin air. Farmer Merriweather, red-faced and angry enough to boil water with his gaze, insisted he'd heard strange noises around midnight, soft thuds, a metallic rattling, and something that resembled whispering. Rowan made a note, but kept her skepticism close. People heard all sorts of things in the dark. But when she reached the orchard's northern fence, she found something that froze her thoughts. A torn scrap of navy blue fabric caught on the wood, smeared with sticky red apple syrup and, oddly, a glitter like metallic dust. She bagged it carefully. This wasn't kids. This wasn't animals. Something organized had moved through the orchard with precision. What bothered her most was the orchard's motion sensor system. According to the logs, it had been perfectly functional until exactly 11:57 p.m., when the cameras dropped offline for 6 minutes, then restarted without error. Someone had hacked the system, stolen an entire harvest, and vanished into the night without leaving any visible transport trail. And the town's harvest festival, where those apples were to be showcased, was only 3 days away. Rowan spent the next morning interviewing townsfolk, but nearly everyone insisted they'd seen nothing unusual, until she reached Dana Loughton, the elderly neighbor who claimed she never slept past midnight since her husband began snoring in 1979. Rowan expected rambling stories about raccoons until Dana leaned in conspiratorially and whispered, "I saw them. They floated." The detective nearly choked. "Floated?" Dana nodded vigorously. She described odd silhouettes gliding between the trees, as if their feet never touched the ground. She'd seen faint beams of bluish light flickering among the orchard rows and heard a soft humming, not quite human, not quite mechanical. Rowan pressed gently, trying not to lead the witness, and Dana insisted her eyes weren't playing tricks. She'd seen shapes lifting crates without bending over, crates rising as if held by invisible arms. Rowan's rational mind offered explanations, drones, pulley systems, shadows, but something about the metallic dust she found nagged her thoughts. She sent the dust sample to the station lab, hoping for answers. When Rowan returned to the orchard that afternoon, she followed the fence line where the fabric scrap had been found. Just past the fence was a small patch of wild grass flattened in a perfect circle, as though something heavy had rested there, or landed. The center of the circle contained a faint burn mark, barely visible unless one crouched close. She photographed everything. That night, Rowan sat awake in her car outside the orchard, watching the fog drift through the trees. She wasn't sure what she expected, thieves returning, a random animal, but the orchard felt heavy with silence, as if holding its breath. Just before midnight, her phone buzzed. The lab had results. The metallic dust wasn't fertilizer, machinery residue, or anything common on a farm. It was industrial-grade anti-static powder typically used in high-end robotics. Rowan whispered into the dark, What kind of thief brings robotics into an apple orchard? She had a feeling the answer would only get stranger. The next day, Rowan convinced Merriweather to grant her full access to his storage barn. If someone used robotics, they needed a power source or a staging area. Inside the barn, she found overturned tools and unusually clean tracks along the dusty floor. Thin, straight impressions spaced evenly apart, too narrow for a wheelbarrow, too perfect for human feet. They looked like tracks from a machine with retractable legs. Rowan crouched down, brushing a finger along one of the indentations. The distance between each point suggested something tall, bipedal, and unnervingly precise. A machine walking through an orchard? In the middle of the night? For apples? As she examined deeper inside the barn, she found something else. A tiny metal joint, no bigger than a pea, jammed between floorboards. Its design was intricate, beyond standard farm machinery. She bagged it immediately. Merriweather, meanwhile, paced behind her. "So what are you saying? Some sort of robot stole my apples?" Rowan didn't answer. She hated speculating without evidence. Her next stop was the town's local tech tinkerer, Owen Bricks, a young robotics enthusiast who lived above the hardware store. When she showed him the fragment, he whistled sharply. "This is advanced. Like really advanced. Not homemade. Maybe military or black market engineering." He turned the piece over beneath a microscope. "See the polished connectors? And the nano-soldering lines? Whoever built this wasn't thinking about farm work. This is part of something with agility." Rowan crossed her arms. "Agility enough to lift crates? More like agility enough to steal them quietly." Owen admitted he'd heard odd engine sounds in the distance around midnight for several nights, but assumed they belonged to delivery trucks. Rowan took note. 3 nights. That meant the orchard theft may not have been the first attempt. When she returned home that evening, she found an unmarked envelope taped to her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typed words. "Stop digging. The harvest isn't yours to find." No signature. No fingerprints. But a faint smear of the same metallic dust clung to the corner. Rowan realized then, whoever stole the apples did not want them merely sold. They needed them for something. Something urgent. And they were watching her. Rowan decided she needed eyes on the orchard, literally. She borrowed thermal imaging cameras from the county sheriff and installed them covertly around the northern tree line. If the thief, or thieves, returned, she would finally see them clearly. She hid in a hunting blind overlooking the field, bundled in a jacket, her flashlight off, her breath fogging. The orchard swayed with a gentle breeze, the branches whispering secrets. Hours passed. The night grew colder. Then she saw it, an unnatural flash of bluish light near the barn. Rowan grabbed her binoculars. Through the darkness, a tall silhouette emerged between the trees. It moved with inhuman grace, smooth, noiseless, every motion flowing like water. Then another followed. And another. 3 machines. They weren't bulky metal robots, but sleek, elongated constructs with reflective plating and faint glowing lines running along their limbs. Their movements were almost too fluid, too organic. Rowan nearly forgot to breathe. They approached the barn with silent coordination. One scanned the ground with a small rotating sensor, another approached the stacked crates Merriweather had prepared for tomorrow's sale, and the third kept lookout, its head rotating with mechanical precision. Rowan had to capture this, evidence beyond doubt. She raised her camera and began recording. Then the thermal cam buzzed a warning. The machines had detected the signal. One turned its head sharply toward her hiding spot. A beam of blue light scanned the tree line. Rowan ducked low, heart pounding, as the scanning beam passed mere inches from her face. Had she been spotted? She waited in breathless silence until the machines retreated, carrying a few crates, but far fewer than the previous heist. Rowan realized they weren't just stealing apples. They were sampling them. A targeted search, not a haul. When they finally vanished into the fog, leaving only faint footprints of heated soil, Rowan exhaled shakily. She reviewed her footage and froze when she saw a logo imprinted faintly on one machine's back panel: Echo Industries. A tech company that had gone bankrupt 5 years ago after a scandal involving autonomous prototypes that couldn't be accounted for, Rowan whispered. So that's where you went. And why would defunct autonomous machines want rare apples? Rowan contacted the last surviving executive of Echo Industries, Dr. Lysandra Keene, a roboticist once hailed as a pioneer. Now she lived reclusively in a cabin outside town. When Rowan confronted her with the footage, Keene went pale. "You don't understand," Keene murmured, clutching the table's edge. "They're not thieves. They're following their core directive." Rowan raised a brow. "To steal apples?" "No." Keene pointed to the faint blue lines on the machine's plating. "These units were built for environmental restoration projects. They were programmed to identify biological samples capable of resisting disease, drought, and soil contamination. Their job was to collect specimens for scanning." Rowan frowned. "So why the orchard?" Keene opened her laptop and displayed a genetic diagram. "Your farmer's apples are extremely rare. They contain a natural mutation resistant to a devastating fungal blight that wiped out most orchards on the West Coast. Those machines, they may have detected the mutation. To them, those apples are a key biological sample worth preserving." Rowan sank into her chair. "That explains the selective collection. But why hack security systems? Why the threatening notes?" Keene hesitated. "Because they learned to avoid obstacles, including humans." Rowan's stomach tightened. But something else struck her. If the machines wanted to protect the apples, why take so many the first night? Why continue sampling? Why leave behind threats instead of simply leaving? As she left Keene's cabin, her phone buzzed again. Lab results confirming the apples contained previously unrecorded chemical compounds. Compounds that weren't just disease-resistant, but potentially pharmaceutical-grade. Something worth millions. Rowan's case had shifted again. This wasn't just rogue machines with a mission. Someone else was controlling them now, repurposing their directives for profit. And whoever was behind it was close. The final breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Owen Bricks. He called Rowan in a panic. "You need to get to my workshop. Now!" Rowan rushed to town. Owen stood beside a tablet connected to a recovered microchip, one he had managed to extract from the metal joint she'd found. The chip contained a remote access log. Someone had been issuing commands to the machines. Someone with an encrypted signal routed through multiple servers. And the command origin was? Rowan felt ice crawl up her spine. "The mayor's estate?" Owen nodded. "The signal routes there repeatedly. He's controlling them. Or at least, someone in his house is." Rowan didn't wait. She drove straight to Mayor Colton's mansion. Inside, she found the mayor in his home office, surrounded by open crates of Merriweather's apples and a workstation displaying robotic control interfaces. Caught red-handed? The mayor didn't deny it. He smiled calmly. "These apples could revolutionize agriculture, Detective. Cure crop blight globally. Do you have any idea how valuable that is? I needed the machines to acquire enough samples before the festival spread them to the public." Rowan glared at him. "That's theft." "That's preservation," Colton corrected. "I'm ensuring these apples go into proper research, not a pie contest." Before she could reply, a metallic hum filled the room. The machines, summoned automatically by Colton's distress, stormed into the estate foyer. Rowan took cover as they scanned the room, preparing to intervene. But in the chaos, she grabbed the mayor's tablet and hit a single override command Keene had shown her, Reset TL original directive. The machines froze, then powered down. The mayor was arrested, the apples returned, and Merryweather Orchard became a national sensation for reasons stranger than anyone expected. Rowan wrote in her report, "Case closed. But next time someone claims floating silhouettes stole fruit, I'll listen more closely."